The massive council chamber stretched across several miles of polished metal and crystal. Representatives from 12 different alien species sat in their designated sections, each group looking vastly different from the others. Some had scales that shimmered like oil on water. Others had multiple arms that moved like graceful dancers, and a few glowed with their own inner light that pulsed with their emotions. Ambassador Zixter stood at the center podium, his reptilian features showing, no emotion, as he read from the holographic document floating before him. His voice carried across the chamber through translation devices that converted his words into hundreds of different languages. The message was simple and direct, just as the Council preferred when dealing with primitive species. Humanity had 30 standard galactic days to withdraw all their settlements, ships, and people back to their home system around the star they called Sol. If they refused, the combined fleets of the Galactic Council would destroy every human presence beyond Earth's orbit. There would be no negotiations, no appeals, and no mercy for those who defied the decision. The vote had been unanimous among all 12 founding species of the Council. The crystalline hegemony voted for destruction because humans were too chaotic. The Aquatic Federation agreed because humans polluted wherever they went. The insectoid swarm saw humans as a threat to galactic order. Each species had their reasons, but the conclusion was always the same. Humans were dangerous. On Earth, President Jake Morrison sat in the emergency session room deep beneath the White House. The former Marine had served 3 tours in conflicts across Earth before entering politics, and his weathered face showed the weight of command. Around the long table sat the most important leaders of humanity, their faces grim as they listened to the translated message from Space Secretary of Defense Lisa Carter pulled up holographic displays showing the human colonies scattered across nearby star systems. 27 worlds now called themselves home to human families, farmers, miners, and scientists. Each settlement represented years of sacrifice and hope as humanity reached for the stars. The idea of abandoning them all seemed impossible too. CONSIDER Dr. Kevin Walsh cleared his throat and began his briefing. As head of Terran Space Command, he knew better than anyone how outmatched humanity was in terms of raw military power. The Council fleet contained over 10,000 warships, each one more advanced than anything humans had ever built. Their weapons could turn planets into dust, and their shields could stop anything humanity might throw at them. The numbers were stark and terrifying. Humanity had managed to build exactly 287 combat vessels over the past 50 years of space exploration. Most of these were converted cargo ships with basic weapons bolted onto their hulls. Only 38 ships could be called true warships, and even these were primitive compared to alien technology. President Morrison asked the obvious question that everyone was thinking. Could humanity fight and win against such overwhelming odds? Dr. Walsh shook his head slowly and admitted that conventional military victory was essentially impossible. The aliens had thousands of years of technological advancement and resources from dozens of worlds. But something interesting had happened during the 3 days since the ultimatum arrived. Reports were flooding in from every human colony, and not a single settlement had requested evacuation transport. Instead, the colonists were asking for weapons, tools, and supplies to build defenses. They wanted to fight. Captain Amy Rodriguez received the emergency transmission while her ship patrolled the edge of the Alpha Centauri system. The TSS Liberty was one of humanity's newest and most powerful vessels, but even she knew it would be useless against a Council destroyer. Her crew of 200 men and women represented some of the best-trained humans in space, yet they would be fighting with weapons that were centuries behind their enemies. As Amy read through the tactical reports, she felt a familiar sensation from her days as a fighter pilot. It was the same feeling she had experienced when facing impossible odds during the Martian Rebellion years ago. Fear mixed with determination, creating a strange kind of calm that settled over her mind. She had been in hopeless situations before, and somehow found a way to win. The response from the colonies continued to surprise everyone in the government. New Texas, a farming world with barely 50,000 inhabitants, reported that they were converting their agricultural equipment into weapons platforms. The mining stations around Kepler 442b were using their industrial tools to build orbital defense systems. Even the luxury resort on Paradise 7 was organizing civilian defense forces. Children across human space were asking their parents not when they would be leaving, but how they could help in the coming fight. Schools began teaching basic engineering and electronics instead of literature and history. Everyone understood that the next few months would determine whether humanity had a future among the stars. General Ryan Brooks commanded the largest military installation on Mars, and his initial assessment was brutally honest: fighting the Council. Fleet in traditional space battles would result in complete annihilation within hours. But humans had never been traditional fighters. Throughout their history, they had won against superior enemies through creativity, sacrifice, and sheer stubborn refusal to surrender. He began developing plans that other species would consider insane. If humanity could not match alien technology, they would have to fight smarter and dirtier than anyone expected. Every asteroid could become a missile, every space station could become a bomb, and every human could become a weapon if necessary. Dr. Susan Kim led the emergency research team, tasked with studying fragments of Council technology that had been recovered over the years. While humans could not duplicate alien engineering, they might be able to understand it well enough to find weaknesses. Her team worked around the clock, fueled by coffee and determination. The breakthrough came when they realized that Council shields operated on quantum frequencies that could be disrupted by specific energy patterns. It would require enormous amounts of power and would only work for a few seconds at a time, but it might give human weapons a chance to actually damage alien ships. As the 30-day countdown began, something remarkable happened across human civilization. Instead of panic and despair, there was a sense of unity and purpose that humanity had never experienced before. The threat of extinction had awakened something deep in the human spirit that their enemies had not expected. The Galactic Council had issued their final warning, expecting humanity to bow down in fear and accept exile to their home system. Instead, they had awakened a species that had conquered their own world through determination and sacrifice. The aliens were about to learn why humans had earned their reputation as the most dangerous species in the galaxy. General Ryan Brooks stood in the command center of Fort Armstrong on Mars, watching as thousands of workers transformed the red planet's surface into a massive military installation. The former peaceful research stations were being converted into weapons manufacturing facilities, while the mining operations now focused on extracting materials for armor plating and ammunition. His staff had initially thought he was crazy when he outlined Project Wildcard, but now they were working with desperate efficiency to make the impossible plan a reality. Traditional military thinking said that fighting the Council fleet was suicide, but humans had never followed traditional military thinking when their survival was at stake. The first phase involved turning every piece of human infrastructure into a potential weapon. Cargo ships were being fitted with nuclear warheads and remote control systems, ready to serve as kamikaze vessels against alien fleets. Passenger liners had their luxury cabins stripped out and replaced with missile launchers and point defense systems. Dr. Susan Kim barely slept as she led her research teams in developing weapons that could actually hurt Council ships. The quantum disruption technology was promising, but it required massive amounts of power and could only be used for short bursts. Her engineers were working on ways to miniaturize the system so it could fit aboard human fighters. The breakthrough came when they realized they could use the same quantum principles that powered human faster-than-light drives. By overloading the drive systems and channeling the energy through modified torpedo warheads, they could create localized space-time distortions that would temporarily disable Council shielding technology. It was dangerous work. And 3 of her test facilities had been destroyed in explosions that left craters visible from orbit. But each failure taught them something new about how to harness the destructive forces they were trying to weaponize against humanity's enemies. Bill Murphy had been a civilian engineer before the crisis began, designing efficient cargo handling systems for the outer colonies. Now he found himself organizing the largest industrial mobilization in human history. Every factory, every shipyard, and every manufacturing facility was being converted for military production. The Mining Guild had volunteered their entire fleet of asteroid processing ships to serve as weapons platforms. These massive vessels were designed to crack open space rocks and extract valuable metals. But with some modifications, they could launch projectiles at significant fractions of light speed. Murphy's teams were turning industrial tools into instruments of war. On Luna, Captain Dan Foster commanded the engineering corps that was transforming Earth's moon into the largest weapons platform in human space. They were using mining equipment borrowed from the asteroid belt to hollow out sections of the lunar surface and install electromagnetic launchers that could accelerate projectiles to incredible velocities. The work was backbreaking and dangerous, with teams working in shifts around the clock to meet impossible deadlines. Foster had lost 12 workers to accidents in the past week alone, but nobody asked to be reassigned to safer duties. Everyone understood that their efforts might be the only thing standing between humanity and extinction. The most ambitious part of the lunar project involved installing massive fusion reactors deep beneath the surface to power the electromagnetic launchers. These reactors were larger and more powerful than anything humans had built before, and if something went wrong, they could crack the moon in half. Foster's teams were also building thousands of smaller weapons platforms hidden across the lunar surface. From space, the moon would still look normal, but every crater and valley now concealed missile batteries and automated defense systems ready to engage any alien ship that came within range. Across human space, families were making preparations. That would have seemed impossible just weeks earlier. Children too young to fight were being evacuated to hidden bunkers on distant worlds, while teenagers learned to operate weapon systems and repair combat equipment. Everyone who could hold a tool or fire a weapon was being trained for the coming battle. The evacuation of non-combatants was perhaps the most heartbreaking part of humanity's preparation. Parents kissed their children goodbye, not knowing if they would ever see them again, while the children begged to be allowed to stay and help fight. The hidden bunkers were stocked with enough supplies to last for years, but nobody knew how long the war might continue. Captain Amy Rodriguez had been promoted to lead the Outer Rim Defense Force, commanding a small fleet of modified cargo vessels that had been turned into warships. Her crews were mostly civilian volunteers who had learned to operate military equipment through hastily organized training programs. The ship modifications were crude but effective. Cargo bays had been converted into missile magazines, while passenger compartments housed point defense lasers and electronic warfare equipment. The ships looked nothing like proper military vessels, but they were ready to fight and die for humanity's future among the stars. Rodriguez spent her time drilling her crews in hit-and-run tactics that might give them a chance against superior alien technology. They could not match Council ships in direct combat, but they could strike fast and disappear before the enemy could respond effectively. It was the same strategy that human pirates and rebels had used throughout history. Intelligence reports from deep space monitoring stations confirmed that the Council fleet had begun moving toward human space. The alien armada consisted of vessels that dwarfed anything in human experience. with the largest ships measuring several miles in length and bristling with weapons that could destroy entire cities with a single shot. But something unexpected was happening within the Galactic Council itself. Several member species were beginning to question the wisdom of exterminating an entire intelligent race, while others worried about the precedent it might set for dealing with future upstart civilizations. The crystalline hegemony remained firmly committed to destroying humanity, but the Aquatic Federation had begun sending secret diplomatic messages suggesting that perhaps a negotiated settlement might be possible. These divisions within the Council gave humanity a small glimmer of hope that they might not have to face all 12 alien species at once. As the weeks passed and the alien fleet drew closer to human space, the pace of preparation became frantic. Every human settlement worked around the clock to build defenses and stockpile weapons, while volunteer crews practiced desperate tactics that might give them a chance against impossible odds. The Council had expected humanity to spend these final weeks in panic and despair, perhaps even surrendering before the fighting began. Instead, they were about to encounter a species that had turned their entire civilization into a weapon pointed directly at their enemies' hearts. The Council fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Sol system exactly 30 days after Admiral Kefvar had delivered the ultimatum. His flagship alone was larger than most human cities, stretching nearly 10 miles from bow to stern and bristling with weapons that could crack planets in half. Behind him followed 3,000 additional warships, representing the combined military might of 12 alien civilizations. Admiral Kefvar studied the tactical displays from his command throne, his reptilian features showing mild curiosity rather than concern. Intelligence reports had suggested that humans possessed fewer than 300 combat vessels, most of which were converted cargo ships with primitive weapons. The plan was simple and had worked against dozens of other defiant species over the centuries. First, they would demonstrate their overwhelming firepower by destroying a few outer settlements as examples. Then they would demand immediate surrender and systematic evacuation of all human colonies. Finally, they would glass every human world beyond Earth as a warning to other species who might consider challenging Council authority in the future. They found in the Sol system defied every prediction their strategists had made. Instead of a desperate evacuation or a few scattered defensive positions, the entire solar system had been transformed into an elaborate fortress. The asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter now pulsed with energy signatures from thousands of hidden weapons platforms and automated defense systems. Mars itself glowed with the heat, signatures of massive industrial complexes and military installations that covered most of the planet's surface. The moon orbiting Earth showed similar signs of fortification, with electromagnetic launchers visible even from the outer system. Most shocking of all, Earth's orbital space was filled with hundreds of makeshift warships and converted civilian vessels ready for battle. Captain Lara Hayes commanded the first human strike force to engage the alien fleet, leading a squadron of 12 modified cargo haulers that had been converted into missile platforms. Her ships looked pathetic compared to the massive Council dreadnoughts, but they carried Dr. Kim's experimental quantum disruption warheads that might give humanity its first chance to actually damage alien vessels. Hayes had been a commercial pilot before the crisis began, flying supply runs between the outer colonies and Earth. Now she found herself at the tip of humanity's spear, leading an attack that would determine whether her species had any hope of survival. Her crew consisted mostly of volunteers who had learned to operate military equipment through crash training courses. The first exchange of fire shocked both sides for completely different reasons. Council plasma beams lanced out across millions of miles of space, their purple energy capable of vaporizing human ships in single hits. Hayes watched 3 of her vessels disappear in brilliant flashes of light, their crews of 20 people each dying instantly. But when the human quantum disruption missiles reached their targets, something unprecedented happened in 3,000 years of galactic warfare. For exactly 4 seconds, the shields surrounding a Council heavy cruiser flickered and failed completely. In that brief window, human kinetic weapons punched through the alien hull and caused actual structural damage to a Council warship. The damage was minimal by military standards, barely scratching the massive vessel's armor plating, but the psychological impact was enormous. Admiral Kethfer stared at his tactical displays in disbelief as damage reports flooded in from the affected ship. No primitive species had ever managed to hurt a Council vessel before. Hayes pressed her attack despite losing half her squadron. In the first few minutes of combat, her remaining ships fired spread patterns of quantum disruption missiles, while human forces throughout the solar system began their coordinated assault. Thousands of kinetic projectiles launched from the moon, while automated defense platforms in the asteroid belt engaged Council scout ships. The aliens quickly adapted their tactics, using their superior speed and maneuverability to stay outside the effective range of human weapons. But every few minutes, another quantum disruption warhead would find its mark and briefly disable enemy shields. Human gunners were getting better at timing their follow-up shots to take advantage of these brief vulnerabilities. Admiral Kethfer ordered a tactical withdrawal to the outer system after losing 2 escort vessels to concentrated human fire. The casualties were insignificant compared to his massive fleet, but the fact that primitives had actually destroyed Council ships was unprecedented. His military advisors were already analyzing the human weapons and developing countermeasures. Back on Earth, President Morrison addressed the world as reports of the first skirmish reached the planet. Humanity had lost 63 ships and over 1,500 lives in the opening battle, but they had also proven that Council vessels could be damaged and destroyed. The psychological victory was almost as important as the tactical one. The President's speech was broadcast to every human settlement throughout known space, carried by quantum communication networks that the aliens had not yet managed to disrupt. His message was simple and direct, reflecting the stubborn determination that had carried humanity from cave dwellers to star travelers in just a few thousand years. They would make the Council pay for every human life with alien blood. They would turn every asteroid and space station into a weapon pointed at their enemies. They would fight in the vacuum of space, on the surfaces of airless moons, and in the corridors of damaged ships until either humanity or the Council fleet was completely destroyed. The alien fleet regrouped at a safe distance while Admiral Kethfer consulted with his fellow commanders through quantum communication links. The crystalline hegemony demanded immediate escalation, suggesting that they should simply destroy Earth and be done with the troublesome species. The insectoid swarm agreed, arguing that humans were proving to be more dangerous than anyone had predicted, but other Council members were beginning to express doubts about the entire campaign. The Aquatic Federation pointed out that humans were showing remarkable courage and ingenuity, qualities that the galaxy needed more of rather than less. The peaceful collective threatened to withdraw their ships entirely if the war continued. Beyond the originally planned quick extermination dot, as the first day of fighting ended, both sides faced uncomfortable realities. The Council had expected to crush human resistance within hours, but instead found themselves dealing with an enemy that fought smarter and harder than anyone had anticipated. Humanity had survived the first test, but at terrible cost and against impossible odds. The real war was just beginning, and neither side knew how it would end. 6 months after the first battle, the war had transformed into something neither side had expected. What the Council planned as a quick extermination had become a grinding campaign of attrition that was bleeding both fleets dry. Human casualties were enormous, with entire colonies reduced to rubble and millions of people dead. But their resistance had only grown stronger with each passing week. Commander Pete Johnson led the famous Ghost Squadron, a unit of heavily modified stealth ships that specialized in hitting Council supply lines deep behind enemy territory. His 12 vessels were built from salvaged alien technology and human ingenuity, capable of slipping past enemy sensors through a combination of advanced cloaking systems and careful piloting through asteroid fields. Johnson had been a smuggler before the war began, running illegal cargo between the Outer Rim colonies and avoiding government patrols through skill and luck. Now those same abilities made him one of humanity's most effective military commanders, striking at fuel convoys and ammunition ships that kept the Council fleet operational. His latest mission involved intercepting a massive supply convoy heading toward the main Council battle group. Intelligence reports suggested that the aliens were running low on the exotic materials needed to maintain their energy shields, making this convoy a critical target for human forces. The attack came without warning as Ghost Squadron emerged from the shadow of a large asteroid, their weapons already charged and targeting systems locked onto the convoy's escort vessels. Johnson's pilots had practiced this maneuver dozens of times, and they executed it with deadly precision despite facing odds of 3-1. Human torpedo salvos overwhelmed the escort ship's point defense systems, while quantum disruption warheads temporarily disabled their shields. In the brief window that followed, conventional human weapons tore through alien hulls and destroyed 3 escort vessels before the convoy could mount an effective response. The supply ships themselves were lightly armed and designed for cargo capacity rather than combat effectiveness. Johnson's squadron methodically destroyed each one, denying the Council fleet millions of tons of critical supplies. The tactical victory was small, but the strategic impact would be felt for weeks as alien ships operated with reduced shield effectiveness. Meanwhile, the siege of New Geneva had become legendary throughout human space. Colonel Mary Thompson commanded a garrison of 8,000 Marines, defending one of humanity's most important agricultural colonies. The planet fed nearly 500,000 people across 3 star systems, making it a high priority target for Council forces. The alien invasion force consisted of 40,000 ground troops, supported by orbital bombardment platforms and atmospheric fighters. By all military logic, the colony should have fallen within days of the initial assault. Instead, Thompson's defenders had held out for 3 months using underground tunnel networks and improvised weapons. The tunnels had originally been built for mining operations, but Thompson's engineers had expanded them into a vast underground fortress that honeycombed the entire continent. Human defenders could appear anywhere on the surface, strike at alien positions, and disappear back underground before enemy forces could respond effectively. Every street and building in the colony had been turned into a death trap filled with explosive charges and automated weapon systems. Council troops found themselves fighting an enemy that seemed to be everywhere and nowhere, taking casualties from hidden positions that vanished as soon as they were discovered. Thompson herself led raids against alien command posts, using her knowledge of the local terrain to outmaneuver enemies with superior technology and numbers. Her Marines had learned to use captured Council weapons against their former owners, while jury-rigged human equipment proved surprisingly effective in close-quarters combat. The siege was costing both sides heavily, but the aliens were losing. Far more troops than military doctrine said was acceptable. Council commanders had expected to overwhelm human resistance through sheer numbers, but instead found themselves trapped in a grinding urban warfare scenario that favored the desperate defenders. Dr. Kim's research teams achieved another major breakthrough with the development of neural interface technology that could directly link human pilots to their ship's control systems. The experimental brain-computer interfaces increased reaction times and decision-making speed dramatically, allowing human fighters to partially compensate for their technological disadvantages. The first test pilot to receive the neural implants was Lieutenant Chris Martinez, a former racing pilot who had volunteered for the dangerous experimental program. The surgery itself was risky and had killed 2 previous volunteers, but Martinez survived the procedure and proved that the technology could work. Flying with a neural interface felt like becoming one with his fighter craft. Martinez reported he could sense incoming missiles before his instruments detected them, and his reaction times improved by nearly 40% over baseline human capabilities. Most importantly, he could track and engage multiple targets simultaneously in ways that had been impossible before. Martinez quickly became humanity's first ace pilot, achieving 27 confirmed kills against Council fighters in his first month of combat operations. His success led to a rapid expansion of the neural interface program, with hundreds of volunteers undergoing the risky surgery despite its high mortality rate. The Council member species were beginning to show serious cracks in their alliance as the war dragged on far longer than anyone had predicted. The peaceful collective formally withdrew their ships from the conflict, arguing that humanity's resistance proved they deserved to survive as an independent species. Other alien governments were facing domestic pressure to end the costly war. That was consuming enormous resources without achieving decisive results. The Aquatic Federation's ruling council voted to begin secret peace negotiations with human representatives, while several minor council species threatened to withdraw their support entirely. Internal divisions within the council were weakening. Their military effectiveness as different species pursued conflicting strategies and refused to share critical intelligence with their allies. Some alien commanders were secretly beginning to admire human tenacity and question whether extermination was the right solution to the problem. As the first year of war ended, both sides were forced to confront harsh realities about their situations. The Council had lost nearly 40% of their original fleet and faced growing political instability on dozens of member worlds. Popular opinion was shifting toward the humans they were trying to destroy. Humanity had lost 15 colonies and nearly half their total population, but their spirit remained completely unbroken. If anything, the terrible losses had only strengthened their determination to make the aliens pay for every human life with interest. The impossible war continued, with no end in sight. The Battle of Titan marked the turning point in humanity's impossible war against the Galactic Council. Fleet Admiral Sandra Price commanded the largest remaining human battle group from her flagship, the converted mining vessel Terra's Hope. As Council forces moved to capture the Saturn system and cut off Earth from its outer colonies, Price had been promoted from captain after the previous fleet commander died defending the Jupiter orbital stations 3 months earlier. She was a career naval officer who had spent 20 years commanding patrol vessels in the Outer Rim, but nothing in her experience had prepared her for leading humanity's final desperate stand against impossible odds, the Council fleet approaching. Titan consisted of over 800 warships led by Admiral Kethvar himself, who was determined to end human resistance once and for all. Intelligence reports suggested that humanity had concentrated their remaining forces around Saturn's largest moon, making it the perfect target for a decisive battle that would crush their military capabilities. What the aliens did not know was that human engineers had spent months turning Titan's methane atmosphere into a weapon. The dense hydrocarbon clouds that shrouded the moon could hide entire fleets from enemy sensors, while specially modified human ships could operate in the toxic environment using sealed life support systems. Price's strategy was brutally simple and reflected humanity's approach to the entire war. They could not match the Council fleet in technology or numbers, so they would make the aliens pay such a terrible price that even victory would feel like defeat. Every human ship was prepared to fight to the death, and many carried nuclear self-destruct charges as a final resort. The battle began when Council scout ships entered Titan's upper atmosphere and immediately lost contact with their main fleet. The methane clouds interfered with alien communication systems and sensor arrays, creating a perfect environment for the Gien's ambush tactics that humans had perfected over months of desperate fighting. Human ships emerged from the toxic fog like ghosts, their hulls scarred by previous battles, and their crews reduced to skeleton complements by months of constant warfare. But they carried new weapons that Dr. Kin's research teams had developed specifically for this battle, including quantum entanglement, torpedoes that could phase through enemy shields entirely. The first salvo of quantum torpedoes caught the Council fleet completely by surprise, passing through their defensive barriers as if they did not exist and detonating inside the hulls of alien warships. 3 Council heavy cruisers exploded in brilliant flashes of light as their fusion reactors overloaded, while dozens of smaller vessels suffered critical damage. Admiral HFY ordered his fleet to withdraw from Titan's atmosphere and engage. The humans in open space, where their superior technology would provide maximum advantage. But Price had anticipated this move and positioned additional human forces throughout the Saturn system to intercept any retreat. A battle raged for 8 hours across millions of miles of space, with both fleets suffering catastrophic casualties as human desperation met alien firepower. Council plasma beams vaporized human ships by the dozens, but quantum weapons and kamikaze attacks were taking an equally heavy toll on the supposedly invincible alien fleet. Price herself died when the Terra's Hope took a direct hit from a Council dreadnought's main batteries, but her sacrifice allowed 3 human torpedo boats to close with the alien flagship and detonate their nuclear warheads against its hull. The explosion cracked the massive vessel in half and killed Admiral HFY along with 8,000 alien crew members. When the smoke cleared and the surviving ships counted their losses, the impossible had happened. The Council fleet was forced to retreat from the Saturn system, leaving behind the wreckage of over 300 warships and abandoning their first major strategic objective since the war began. The victory at Titan sent shockwaves through the galaxy that reached far beyond the immediate military situation. News of humanity's triumph spread to dozens of worlds where other species had chafed under Council rule for centuries, inspiring hope that the galactic order might finally be changing. 3 more Council member species formally withdrew from the HFY War in the weeks following Titan, while others began sending secret diplomatic messages to human representatives. The Galactic Council's iron grip on galactic civilization was fracturing under pressure from a species they had tried to exterminate. On the Council homeworld of Vexstar, Emperor Voshik faced the largest political crisis in his 300-year reign. Public opinion had shifted dramatically toward the humans his government was trying to destroy, while the economic cost of the war was bankrupting entire star systems. Ambassador Zixter, who had delivered the original ultimatum to humanity, now found himself advocating for peace negotiations with the same species he had condemned to extinction. The military situation was deteriorating rapidly, and continuing the war might result in the complete collapse of Council authority throughout the galaxy. The decision to offer humanity a ceasefire came after heated debates that lasted for weeks. Conservative factions wanted to escalate the conflict by deploying planet-killing weapons, while moderate voices argued that humanity had earned the right to exist through their incredible resistance. Captain Amy Rodriguez, now promoted to Admiral, after 2 years of constant combat, received the unprecedented message while commanding human forces in the Alpha Centauri system. The Galactic Council was requesting immediate ceasefire negotiations and offering humanity full membership in the galactic community with all the rights and territories they currently held. The proposal was transmitted directly to Earth, where President Morrison faced the most important decision in human history. After 18 months of devastating warfare that had cost millions of lives, the aliens were offering everything humanity had originally wanted: recognition as equals rather than subjects, Morrison's response was delivered before a joint session of the United Nations and broadcast to every human settlement throughout known space. Humanity would accept the Council's offer, but only on their own terms as full equals with the same rights and privileges as any other galactic civilization. The war that began with an ultimatum demanding human submission ended with humanity dictating the terms of their own acceptance into galactic society. The species that had been deemed too dangerous to exist had forced the galaxy's greatest powers to recognize their right to the stars through sheer determination and refusal to surrender. As peace treaties were signed and reconstruction began, both sides learned valuable lessons from their former enemies. The Council discovered that technological superiority meant nothing against absolute determination, while humanity learned that sometimes the greatest victory comes not from winning battles, but from refusing to accept defeat. The galaxy would never be the same. As other species looked to humanity's example and began questioning the authority that had kept them subjugated for millennia. The age of absolute council dominance was ending, replaced by a new era where courage and determination mattered more than advanced weapons or ancient privileges.